Well, welcome, fellow faculty. This is Dr. Michael Timms, and I'm here to talk about using concepts from homeschooling to build resilience in our students. And this has been timely for me of late, since I have struggled at times with students' fear about engaging the questions in the field of herbalism. They're so trained to get the answers right and to try to get a grade that sometimes they forget that it's about the probing of the information and the resilience to continue to step into the unknown that are going to get them to the interesting work, give them the skill sets to actually be change agents. And so this is something I've faced in some coursework recently where I've gotten some feedback that I found frustrating. So for me, it's also to reiterate the principles that I really work from as a teacher. So this quote from Brene Brown on her talk on empathy, I thought was particularly useful. This is TEDx 2010, and she says there is only one guarantee: you will get your ass kicked. So learn to listen to detractors and still be able to say, I see you, I hear you, but I'm showing up anyway. So with that in mind, our traditional academic model was built to serve the needs of industrial society. And you can just look at the hierarchy of the subjects and how important they are relative to each other to see that a lot of students, they get educated out of their own innate creativity and talent. And the phrase that echoes from a lot of parents, you'll never get a job doing that. I know I experienced that. I graduated with an undergraduate degree in poetry and modern dance, and I definitely heard that and ended up working as a stockbroker for 5 years before partnering in a health food store, and those were the first steps really into my love of medicinal plants. So I think we have to be cognizant of that we are actually on the other side. We have such a specialty niche that we are appealing to those that are bringing their passion to us, and what they want out of it ostensibly are jobs, but I really think what they want out of it are deeply fulfilling lives. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about the nature of education, a different model, and how we might apply it to our programs, particularly the online programs. So my question for you is, how did you develop your own resilience? Because each of you have succeeded, some more than others, but you're here and you've done what you wanted to do. What is it that helped you develop that resilience to keep at it, to keep developing your expertise, and to apply it in an arena that you love and you feel like you're a change agent? So I'll leave you with that thought and hope that you'll revisit it. So the homeschooling models that I'll delineate and use as sort of a jumping off point for some discussion are multiple intelligences, Montessori, and Waldorf. And the latter two, I know you know these as actual schools, but they started out in homeschooling settings. So what do they have in common? So the commonality I found is really a goal that allows the person to select their own path, and for that person to emerge as a high-functioning contributor. And I think as we discuss these models, what I'll try to pull out of them are the challenges and the types of support we might need to provide to our faculty to see some of those endpoints actually come to fruition. So Harvard University's Project Zero on multiple intelligences focuses on a person's strengths, not their weaknesses. And they look at linguistic, logical, mathematical, bodily, kinesthetic, visual, and auditory. Now, I think most of us do these pretty well. This is just sort of built into our academia, into the culture. At least here, acupuncture and yoga does this fairly well. It's built in some respects. The piece I think I'll focus on is this visual, and particularly because it's difficult to do this online. And we can argue about some of the others, the bodily kinesthetic, but I'm going to focus on this one in particular. And for me, the challenge is to invite them into the act of doing. And this is for the herbal side and for some other programs as well. This is medicine making labs or field intensives, cooking demos, needling points, yoga poses, coaching sessions. If all these are going to be visual in nature and we're going to still do it online, there's going to be some real innovation we need to come up with. Some of the support we need around that to truly innovate is appropriate video technology and software. We need to be able to have the timing to do test runs. And we need fairly robust student feedback loops so we can hear whether it's working or not. We're going to need to experiment with both synchronous and asynchronous delivery. I think our initial foray into online has been all asynchronous, and I think some balance now might be to bring back some more synchronous sharing of information. And I think the other part of this is we're going to need to build up a more rigorous endpoint to what it is we're actually getting them to do. So I'll take the case of the medicine making. We can teach them some explicit recipes, but we need to, in the end, also challenge them to figure out some problems all on their own, with no hand holding, where they actually have to fall, scrape their knees, get back up, and try again. Montessori was started by Italian physician educator Maria Montessori, and she framed it within the idea of errorless learning, emphasized beauty and quality. This program allowed students to choose their activity. It provided uninterrupted blocks of work time and used discovery model. Students learn from doing or making something. Again, that same theme is being reiterated. Before I get to challenges and support, I'm going to throw Waldorf in there because you're going to see there's a lot of overlay between these two systems. And this was started by Austrian philosopher Rudolf Steiner and the anthropomorphism movement. And here the idea is to educate the entire being, the body, mind, and spirit. And in that, you're cultivating self-awareness or social competence. In some ways, I think this could be reimagined as healing presence. They figure things out for themselves. Again, here's this immersion in that discovery method. Allow students to create their own textbooks and assess students through reports on individual academic progress and personal development characterized by qualitative description. Now, I have a personal story around that. I went to a Waldorf school in Germany for 3 years. It was the first 3 years of my education, and I loved it. I got to walk through an old medieval Renaissance graveyard, and often was late to school because we'd play hide and seek there. And the learning itself was wonderful, and I have the report cards still from those days. And this is really a form of narrative assessment, which I'll come back to. But I couldn't read German anymore. German had been my third language before English, and I was at University of Maryland getting my doctorate, and I went to the German language department and had them read it. Found out simple things like I was left-handed and had refused to learn to use my right hand. By the time I read that, I had become right-handed. In that school, they really wanted to focus on retraining folks. And so now I've returned to using my left hand for more and more things. But I also found out that I did not like to sit still and that I got along with everybody. And there was a lot more description of my own personality and where that helped and where it hindered. So it was very interesting after all these years to read that. Now, the challenge is, how do you guide students through mastering something or figuring it out? And that's a lot of hands-off, but there are points of intervention. There's timings to when you step in, and there's ways that you frame or create a matrix for them to step in and work on their own. If students can choose their own activity or create their own textbook, what are a range of outcomes that are acceptable then? And if there's nothing to mark wrong, what are we assessing? And I think this is, it sounds like a simple question, but I think this is at the heart of it. What are we going to assess if we're letting them figure things out, do things on their own? And I'll throw out one last piece is, can you spot when you're assigning busy work? I think this is built into our academic model a little bit. I don't think we're always as clean in deciding that an assessment is really something that's going to move their expertise forward, but it's really a way for us to sort of stop the proceedings and take a measurement. And it might not be the best measurement. We may not clearly understand what we're measuring. So I'll throw that piece out there. Now, some of the support functions, and this is true, I think, throughout the models of this homeschooling, which is the role of grading versus feedback. We do have a pass-fail system here, and I know we have a committee that I'm working with to articulate this a little bit larger scheme. But in the meantime, I know I have moved away from this idea of assigning numerical grades, because I have struggled with this from the first time I got into academia as a student. It just never made sense to me. It had nothing to do with helping me learn, and I really didn't know what the difference was between a 78 and an 83. So I've gone toward using narrative assessment, which uses rubrics, and within the framework of our system, it still needs to have a student master 80% of those rubrics that were assigned. But my work is continuous in that I'm constantly giving feedback about what they're doing well and what are areas that they need to improve on. And that improvement piece can either be you're hitting the bottom rung so it's acceptable, or you need to turn this back in, you need to redo it. So they give as many opportunities as they can during the trimester to redo work in order to finally master it. And I think that mastery piece is really about building skill sets and expertise, and not only building it into our courses, but programmatically, so that we continue to build on it. And that means they're done in smaller pieces until that smaller element can be coalesced into something much larger, and the level of articulation and the complexity of the thinking can actually occur. So I think we need to build up to that. I think there's a potential idea of using contracts to give student control over their outcomes and assessments. And I mentioned the narrative assessment already, and I think I've described that for you. So if we are truly an institution of exceptional learning, then this resilience is going to give our students the scaffolding they need to hone that passion that they brought here deep into a fulfilling life. Not just a fulfilling job, but life. And that means we need to equip them with these exceptional skills. We need to challenge them to dance with not knowing, with uncertainty, with getting it wrong, without having to hold their hands through all this. I think our clinical work, our educational work, our research work, our medicine making, any of this is built on tremendous amounts of uncertainty. And the ability of our students as practitioners to sit comfortably in that uncertainty and still collect data from a data-rich environment and make decisions around that, and come back to that initial decision on an iterative basis and begin to alter the trajectory of that decision based on new data coming in, is at the heart of what we do. So I think it really speaks to supporting their development as very creative, improvisational, problem-solving people. And I think that's really part of the exceptional learning that they have to have coming out of our school. So I want to thank you for your time and wish you well.